The mountain stood like a giant made of ice and stone. Snowstorms moved across its sharp ridges, and the cold wind sang a song that no human wanted to hear. Beneath this frozen wall of nature, there was a hidden door made of steel. Behind that door was the last seed vault of Earth. Inside the vault, endless shelves rose into the shadows, filled with sealed containers. Each container carried seeds of trees, crops, and plants that once covered the planet in green. It was more than a building. It was the memory of Earth before the wars. It was the hope of a new beginning, a promise that life could grow again if someone kept it safe. The guardian of this vault was a young beautiful woman named Lyra. She had a soft natural beauty, but it was not beauty she cared about. What she cared about was her duty. Her eyes were sharp, her mind alert, and her heart heavy with memories of the past. She lived here alone, day after day, with only machines to keep her company. Lyra walked through the cold halls, listening to the low hum of the cooling systems. She checked the screens that showed the vault's temperature and pressure. She touched the walls, making sure there was no sign of damage. Every sound mattered, every light mattered, because if the vault failed, then the last chance for life on Earth would also fail. She carried a small journal. Each day she wrote in it. She wrote about the machines, about the weather outside, about the seeds she guarded. But mostly, she wrote about humans. She wrote that she could not trust them. Once, many years ago, people had come to this place. They had claimed they wanted to help. They wore fine coats and spoke fine words, but their hands were greedy. They wanted to take seeds for themselves, not for the earth. They wanted to own life, not protect it. Lyra remembered the fire they left behind when she drove them out. She remembered the smoke rising into the white sky, black against the snow. Since that day, her trust in humans was broken. Now she trusted only the vault. The machines never lied. The doors never made promises they could not keep. The shelves never betrayed her. Her daily routine was strict. She woke before the sun rose, though the mountain often hid the light. She checked the power lines, made sure the backup generators were full. She cleaned the panels that tracked the air quality. She tested the alarms to be certain they still worked. Then she walked to the main chamber where the oldest seeds were kept. She would place her hand on the containers and whisper to herself, "You are safe. You will grow again one day." These words were not for the seeds alone. They were also for her heart, because sometimes she felt as if she was the one locked away, waiting for life to begin again. At night she sat by a small lamp, reading books she had saved from her childhood. Stories of forests, oceans, and farms. Stories of children running through fields of wheat, or climbing trees heavy with fruit. She read them aloud, letting her voice fill the empty halls, pretending the seeds were listening. In this way, the vault never felt completely silent. But silence could also be heavy. Lyra sometimes felt it pressing against her, like the weight of the mountain above. She would walk to the entrance and open the first gate, looking out at the world of snow. The wind struck her face, sharp and bitter, but she stood there until she felt strong again. She told herself the storms were her allies. They kept others away. They hid the vault from those who might come to harm it. Still, in the back of her mind, there was always a question. How long could she guard this place alone? Machines could fail. Her own strength could fail. Yet she did not dare think of finding help. Help meant humans, and humans meant danger. One evening, as the day sank into darkness, she sat with her journal. She wrote slowly, the pen scratching across the page. Another day has passed. The vault is safe. The seeds are safe. I am safe. But I cannot stop thinking about the world outside. If no one changes, if no one learns, then what future can these seeds have? Still, I will guard them. That is my duty. That is my life. She closed the book and placed it carefully on a shelf. She turned off the lamp, letting the shadows spread across the chamber. Only the steady hum of the machines remained. Lyra lay down on her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. She whispered once more, "No human can be trusted." The words echoed in her own ears, and then silence returned. Outside, the storm grew louder, covering the mountain in snow. And hidden deep inside that mountain, Lyra slept lightly, ready to rise at the smallest sound, ready to guard the last seed vault of earth against anyone who might come. The storm outside had lasted 3 long days. The mountain groaned as wind struck its sides, and the snow fell so thick that the world seemed buried in white silence. Inside the vault, Lyra worked without pause. She checked the cooling systems twice each day, tested the power lines, and walked through the endless shelves of seeds. Every sound of the machines comforted her, for they were loyal companions. But on the 4th night, something changed. As she sat near the entrance, listening to the roar of the storm, a faint sound touched her ears. It was not the voice of the wind or the scrape of ice. It was softer, uneven, almost like footsteps. Lyra froze. For a moment she thought her mind was playing tricks, but the sound came again. Someone was moving outside the steel door. Her heart beat faster. She rose to her feet and walked quickly to the security screen. Cameras placed outside the gate showed nothing but a wall of snow. Still, she knew she had not imagined it. She tightened her coat and strapped the small weapon she always carried to her side. The outer alarm rang once, then stopped. Lyra's hand hovered over the controls. The alarm only rang when the heavy gate was touched. That meant someone was truly there. She opened the first panel to look out into the storm. The wind struck her face with icy fingers, but she ignored the sting. Through the white haze, she saw a dark shape moving slowly toward the door. A person. The figure stumbled, fell to one knee, then forced himself back up. Snow clung to his hair and clothes. He carried a small pack on his back, nothing more. His movements were weak but determined. Lyra's eyes narrowed. A human, here at her gate. She pressed the speaker button beside the steel wall. Her voice cut into the storm, sharp and cold. "Go back. This place is not for you." The figure lifted his head. His face was pale from the cold, and his lips trembled as he spoke. "Please. I mean no harm. I only need shelter. I only need a chance." Lyra did not lower her guard. She had heard words like these before. People always claimed they meant no harm, yet they always carried greed in their hearts. She had sworn never to trust such words again. "You cannot enter," she said firmly. "Leave now." The man shook his head, his breath a cloud in the freezing air. "I will not take your seeds. I swear it. I came because I heard of this place. They said a guardian still lived here. I only want to see if the stories were true." His voice cracked with exhaustion. He dropped to one knee again, his body shaking from the cold. Lyra hesitated. The storm was fierce, and no human could survive long without shelter. Yet she reminded herself that survival made people dangerous. A desperate man would say anything. "What is your name?" she asked at last. "Ryan," he answered softly. "I am from the southern plains." My village is gone. I walked for many weeks to reach this mountain. I have nothing left but hope. The name was simple. The story sounded plain. But Lyra's mind was filled with suspicion. She remembered the day years ago when other men came, smiling and bowing, speaking of friendship. They had asked for only a few seeds, just to grow crops for their people. She had believed them. She had opened the gate. And they had tried to take everything. Fire and smoke filled her memory still. That betrayal lived inside her like a scar. So she told herself she could not trust this Ryan. Yet something in his eyes held her attention. They were tired eyes, yes, but not greedy. They did not shine with hunger for power. They seemed to carry only sadness and a strange kind of patience. Still, she could not let him in. You may stay near the gate until the storm ends, she said after a long silence. But you will not cross the inner door. Do you understand? Ryan nodded weakly. Thank you. That is more than I expected. Lyra closed the speaker and watched him through the camera. He found a small space beneath the outer roof of the vault where the snow did not fall so heavily. He sat there, pulling his thin cloak tightly around his body. The storm still whipped at him, but at least he had some protection. Hours passed. Lyra did not leave her post. She kept her eyes on the screen, expecting at any moment that Ryan would try to break in. But he did not. He simply sat, his head bowed, his body trembling from the cold. At one point, he pulled something from his pack. It was a broken piece of metal, part of a small machine. Slowly, with stiff fingers, he began to work on it. He bent wires, tightened screws, and shaped the piece into something useful. Lyra tilted her head as she watched. She did not understand why someone near death would spend his last strength fixing broken metal instead of trying to break inside. Later, when the storm eased, Ryan looked up toward the camera. His lips moved, though Lyra had muted the sound. She read the shape of his words, "Thank you." She did not reply. She turned off the screen and leaned back in her chair, her mind uneasy. For years she had told herself she could not trust any human. And yet now, in the middle of a frozen storm, one sat outside her gate who had not begged for food, not demanded to enter, not tried to break through. Instead he had thanked her for the smallest kindness. The thought unsettled her. She told herself it meant nothing. He was only acting, waiting for his chance. Humans always showed their true face in time. Still, as she closed her eyes that night, she could not push away the image of his tired eyes staring into the storm. And deep in her heart, a question she hated began to grow. What if this human was different? The storm faded at last. The mountain stood quiet under a sky of pale gray. Snow still lay heavy across the land, but the wild winds had gone. Lyra stood by the security screen, watching the stranger outside. Ryan was still alive. His face looked pale, but his hands were steady as he tied together pieces of wire and shaped them into neat patterns. He worked as if the cold did not exist, though his lips were blue and his breath came out in clouds. Lyra felt a strange pull in her chest as she watched him. A memory rose in her mind, one she wished would stay buried. Years ago, before the world was broken, she had welcomed others to the vault. They had knocked on her gates with smiles. Their leader was a tall man with kind words. He spoke of saving children in his village. He said he needed just a few seeds to grow food. His eyes shone with false warmth. Lyra had believed him. She had opened the first door, let them inside the outer hall. But once the steel door closed behind them, their smiles changed. Weapons appeared. They tried to force the inner gate. Their voices turned harsh, full of greed. They shouted that they wanted not just a few seeds but all of them. They wanted control over the vault. Lyra had fought them back. She had used the systems she knew so well, shutting off the outer oxygen, locking heavy barriers, and driving them into retreat. But they had set fires before they fled. Smoke filled the halls, black and choking. For days she worked to clean the vault, to save what remained. That day scarred her heart. That day taught her the truth: no human could be trusted. And now, outside, another man sat in the snow. He did not shout. He did not demand. He worked quietly, repairing scraps of metal. But Lyra's mind repeated the same warning. It is a trick. All humans hide their true face until the moment they strike. She turned on the speaker. Her voice echoed from the steel wall. Why are you here, Ryan? Why do you risk your life in this place? You know I will not open the vault for you. Ryan looked up, blinking against the weak sunlight. His voice was hoarse but steady. I know. I am not here to steal. I came because I needed to see if the stories were true. They said a guardian still lived here, keeping hope alive. I did not believe it, but now I see it with my own eyes. That is enough for me. His words unsettled Lyra. He asked for nothing. He wanted nothing. He only wanted proof. It felt strange, almost dangerous, because it was too simple. She asked again, sharper this time. What do you plan to do now? Will you stay until you die in the snow? He gave a small smile, though his lips trembled. If that is what happens, so be it. I walked too far to turn back. But I do not regret coming here. Lyra stared at the screen. The memory of betrayal clashed with the sight before her. She felt as if two voices spoke inside her head. One said, do not trust. He is like the others. The other whispered, his eyes are not greedy. His voice is not false. She turned away from the screen and walked deep into the vault, as if distance would quiet her thoughts. The shelves of seeds stood tall around her. She ran her fingers across the cold metal of one container. Inside were seeds of wheat, the same wheat that once grew golden fields across the plains. She imagined those fields again, and for a brief moment, she imagined people walking there, harvesting together, building something better. Her hand tightened on the container. She whispered aloud. I cannot trust him. I will not. But her voice sounded weak in the echo of the chamber. When she returned to the entrance later that day, she saw Ryan had built a small fire with bits of wood he had carried in his pack. The flame was faint, but it gave him warmth. He sat close, holding his hands out, his face lit by the glow. Lyra frowned. Fire reminded her of betrayal, of the men who had filled her vault with smoke. She wanted to hate the sight. Yet this fire was small, gentle, not a weapon but a shield against the cold. Ryan noticed the camera light and lifted his head. His expression was calm. Guardian, he said softly, I will not ask you to let me in. I only ask for your voice. I have walked for many weeks without hearing another human speak. If you will not trust me with your gates, then speak to me through the walls. That will be enough. The request struck Lyra in a place she had long hidden. She had lived in silence for years, her only voice the echo of her own words. And now a man asked her to speak, not to give, not to share, only to speak. Her hand hovered over the button. For a long moment she fought with herself. Then, against the warning of her heart, she pressed it. "My voice will not bring you comfort," she said. Ryan smiled faintly. "You are wrong. It already has." That night, Lyra did not sleep easily. She lay awake, remembering the flames of betrayal and the calm eyes of the stranger. Her thoughts twisted like the storm winds outside. She told herself she would not let him in, never, not even if the mountain itself fell. But a seed of doubt had already been planted. And deep inside her chest, where she once felt only cold steel, something warm began to stir. Days passed. The snow outside the mountain softened, but the cold never left. The sky remained gray, and the wind carried whispers of more storms to come. Inside the vault, the machines hummed faithfully, and the shelves stood tall with their silent treasures. Lyra walked through the long corridors, checking each screen, each pipe, and each container. It was her routine, her duty, the rhythm of her life. But something had changed. No matter where she went, her thoughts returned to the figure outside. Ryan had built a small shelter near the outer gate with the little he carried. He used broken panels and frozen stones to block the wind. He tended his fire carefully, making it last with only tiny pieces of wood. Through the cameras, Lyra watched him work, watched him rest, watched him wake each morning with slow movements. He never came closer than she allowed. He never tried to force his way in. Her heart wrestled with itself. One part of her whispered warnings of betrayal, reminding her of the past. Another part, quieter but stronger each day, whispered that this man was different. One evening, as she checked the cooling system, a sharp alarm rang through the vault. A red light flashed on the main screen. Lyra hurried forward, her breath quickening. One of the cooling units in the east chamber had failed. She rushed to the chamber, pulling tools from the storage wall. The air inside was already warming, and the seeds stored here were sensitive. She bent down, opening the machine, her hands working quickly to fix the broken circuit. But the damage was worse than she expected. The system needed parts she did not have. She pressed her lips together, thinking fast. There was only one way to hold the temperature steady. She would need to repair the old backup system, one she had ignored for many months. She hurried to the outer hall where the backup sat, dusty and silent. The machine was large, with wires tangled like roots. Lyra tried to remember the last time she had tested it. It was too long ago. She bent down and began to work, but soon her hands slowed. Some of the parts were beyond her skill. Her mind grew tight with fear. If the backup failed, the east chamber seeds could be lost forever. She worked harder, but the machine only sparked and groaned. A voice came through the speaker, calm and steady. "You cannot fix it alone." Lyra stiffened. She turned her head toward the camera. Ryan was standing near the outer shelter, his face pale but his eyes clear. "I saw the lights change," he said. "The vault is in trouble. Let me help. I know machines. I can repair things you cannot." Lyra's chest tightened. The words cut into her heart like ice. She did not want to need anyone, especially not another human. But the machine in front of her buzzed weakly, and the chamber alarm still rang. Her voice came sharp. "If I let you touch this, you may harm more than you heal." Ryan shook his head. "You guard the seeds. I only want to keep them alive. If I fail, you lose nothing more than you already risk. But if I succeed, you will save what cannot be replaced." The truth of his words pressed against her doubts. She wanted to refuse him, to hold on to her rule that no human could be trusted. Yet the East Chamber held seeds of rice, seeds that once fed millions. She pictured them dying because of her pride, and she felt her will bend. At last, she pressed the gate control. The heavy steel moved, opening a narrow passage to the outer hall. She stood there with her weapon in hand as Ryan stepped inside for the first time. His steps were slow, careful. He looked not at the shelves, not at the doors beyond, but only at the broken backup machine. He knelt down, studying the wires. His hands moved with skill, untangling the mess, reconnecting circuits. Sparks flew, but he did not flinch. Lyra stood beside him, every muscle tense. She watched his every move, ready to strike if he turned his eyes to the wrong place. But he never did. His focus stayed on the machine. Hours passed as they worked side by side. Lyra handed him tools, though her hand shook each time she gave them. Ryan repaired one line after another, his brow wet with sweat despite the cold. At last, the backup gave a low hum. The lights on the panel turned from red to green. The East Chamber cooled again. The alarm stopped. Silence filled the hall, deep and heavy. Ryan leaned back, his shoulders slumping with relief. "It will hold now," he said softly. "But you should check it each day. The parts are old." Lyra did not answer at once. She stared at the machine, then at him. Her heart was caught between two truths. One truth was her oath never to trust a human. The other truth stood before her, a man who had just saved thousands of seeds with his hands. Finally, she spoke. "You did not betray me." "Not yet." Ryan gave a small smile. "I never will." She turned away sharply, unwilling to let her heart soften. She locked the outer gate once more, leaving him in the cold shelter. Yet as she walked back into the deep chambers of the vault, her thoughts no longer held only anger and fear. They now carried something else, something she did not want to name. That night, as she lay on her narrow bed, the silence pressed against her again. But this time, it did not feel the same. It felt as if the silence waited for something new. And Lyra, though she told herself she would not, began to wonder what it might be like to no longer guard the vault alone. The mountain slept under thick snow, silent except for the wind. Inside the vault, the machines hummed with steady life. The air was cool again, the seeds safe. But Lyra's thoughts were not calm. They twisted and turned like restless rivers. She remembered the moment she let Ryan inside to repair the backup machine. Every part of her had screamed that it was a mistake, yet she had done it. And he had not betrayed her. He had saved the chamber. That truth lived in her mind now, and no matter how she tried, she could not chase it away. Still, she reminded herself, trust was dangerous. A human could act honest for a day, for a week, even for months, but one moment of greed could destroy everything. The days that followed tested her resolve. The vault needed constant care, and problems never came one at a time. Small alarms lit up across the screens. Pipes needed mending. Panels needed adjusting. The backup machine still hummed, but it demanded daily checks. Lyra worked long hours, moving through the chambers with tools in hand. Her body grew tired. Her mind grew heavier. She could not rest, for rest meant risking the seeds. Yet each time she looked at the cameras, she saw Ryan outside, sitting in the snow shelter, his breath white in the air. He never moved toward the gates. He never tried to force his way in. One evening, as she struggled with a broken panel, she dropped her tool. Her hands trembled with exhaustion. She sat on the cold floor, her chest rising and falling in sharp breaths. The machine in front of her beeped weakly, waiting to be fixed. Her eyes closed for a moment, and she whispered to herself, "I cannot do this alone forever." The words startled her, for she had never spoken them aloud. She shook her head, trying to drive them away, but they clung to her. The speaker crackled. Ryan's voice came softly. "You look tired, Guardian. Let me help you again." Lyra froze. She had forgotten the outer cameras carried sound. She stood quickly, anger flaring, though the anger was mixed with something else. "I do not need your help," she said firmly. But even as she spoke, her eyes drifted to the machine sparking at her side. She thought of the countless shelves behind her, the millions of seeds waiting for a chance at life. Could she risk them just to hold on to her pride? She gritted her teeth and opened the gate again, just a little. Ryan entered, careful and respectful, keeping his eyes away from the deep chambers. He knelt at the panel and studied the wires. His hands were steady, his touch patient. Within minutes, the machine stopped beeping and returned to normal. When the panel glowed green again, Lyra let out a slow breath. Relief mixed with unease. "You are skilled," she admitted, though her voice was low. Ryan gave a small smile. "I learned to repair machines in my village. When the land grew poor, we had to keep every tool alive as long as possible. Machines were like bones to us. If they broke, life broke with them." His words carried no boast, only truth. Lyra studied his face. There was no hunger in his eyes, no shadow of greed. Still, she turned quickly and closed the gate behind him once more. The next days followed the same pattern. A machine would fail, or a pipe would leak, and Ryan would offer his skill. Each time, Lyra hesitated, then opened the gate only enough for him to work. Each time, he repaired what she could not. And each time, he stepped back without asking for more. The vault grew stable again, humming with life. But inside Lyra, a storm was building. She had spent years believing she needed no one, that no one could be trusted. Now she found herself depending on a man she had sworn to keep out. One night, as she sat by her lamp with her journal, she tried to put her feelings into words. Today he repaired the water pipes. Without him, they might have burst. He never looked at the seeds. He never asked for anything in return. I do not understand why. Humans always want something. Why does he not? I fear I am beginning to listen to his silence more than my own doubts. She closed the journal, her hand shaking slightly. The next morning, the mountain gave her another test. A tremor shook the halls, small but enough to rattle the shelves. A few containers slid from their places. Lyra rushed to catch them, her heart pounding. Ryan was at the outer gate in moments, his voice urgent through the speaker. "Let me in. I can help steady the supports." Lyra's breath came fast. She looked at the shelves towering above her, the seeds that carried the memory of forests, fields, and gardens. She looked at her own hands, trembling from the weight of endless days. She looked at the gate, where Ryan waited. This was the moment. To trust or not to trust. To open the vault fully, or to keep him locked out forever. Her voice was low, but firm. "You may come in. But know this: if you betray me, I will never forgive it." Ryan bowed his head. "I will not betray you." The gate opened wider than ever before. Ryan stepped inside, his eyes lifting to the vast shelves of seeds. For the first time, he saw the true heart of the vault. His face softened with awe, not greed. He whispered as if speaking to a holy place. "This is life. This is hope." Lyra watched him carefully. And though her chest tightened, she felt a strange lightness too. She had made her choice. She had given him a chance. The vault no longer belonged to her silence alone. The vault had grown quieter in Lyra's heart. For the first time in many years, she did not feel completely alone within its cold walls. Ryan now walked beside her in the outer halls. He never crossed into the deepest chambers unless she allowed it, and even then, his eyes carried only wonder, not greed. Together, they worked to keep the machines alive. Ryan's steady hands repaired what Lyra's weary ones could not. Pipes were reinforced. Alarms were tested and fixed. The backup system hummed with strength it had not shown in years. The vault seemed healthier, and so did Lyra's spirit. But peace was fragile in the world outside. And shadows always followed whispers of hope. One evening, as snow fell thick across the mountain, Ryan stood at the outer cameras, scanning the horizon. His voice was sharp when he called to Lyra. Movement. More than one. Lyra hurried to the screen. Shapes moved through the white storm. At first, they looked like dark stains against the snow, but soon their forms grew clear. There were 6 of them, wrapped in heavy coats, carrying long weapons. They walked with the purpose of wolves hunting prey. Lyra's chest tightened. She knew what they wanted. The seeds had always been a secret, but secrets had a way of escaping. Raiders had found them before, and now they were here again. "They will not stop," she said, her voice low. "They came for the vault. They will try to take everything." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Then we must defend it?" Lyra glanced at him. His eyes were calm but firm. He did not tremble, he did not step back. For the first time, she realized he was ready to fight for the seeds as much as she was. The raiders reached the outer gate and struck it with heavy tools. The sound echoed through the vault like thunder. Lyra locked every barrier, her fingers flying across the controls. Sparks flew as the outer alarms lit up. From the speakers, a harsh voice shouted, "Open the vault. We know what lies within. If you resist, we will burn this mountain to the ground." Lyra's hands shook, but her voice came sharp. "These seeds are not yours. Leave now." The raiders only laughed. The sound was cruel, carried through the wind. They struck the gate again and again. Inside, Ryan looked at Lyra. "We cannot let them in. Show me the defenses. I will help." For a heartbeat, she hesitated. Then she nodded. Together, they ran through the control halls. Lyra showed him the systems she had guarded alone for years: hidden vents, freezing traps, and sealed barriers of steel. She had designed them not only to protect the seeds but to punish those who tried to take them. The raiders cut through the first outer door. Snow poured into the hall. They cheered, believing they were close to victory. But Lyra pressed a switch, and freezing gas filled the entrance. The men coughed and stumbled back, their cheers breaking into shouts of anger. Still, they did not retreat. Greed drove them forward. They struck harder, forcing their way into the second hall. Ryan moved quickly, setting traps with the scraps of wire he carried. He linked them to the alarm system, turning it into a defense. When the raiders stepped forward, sparks burst under their feet, driving them back again. The battle stretched through the night. The mountain shook with the clash of wool. The raiders were many, but the vault had defenders who would not yield. At one point, Lyra stood by the inner gate, weapon in hand, ready to give her life if the walls broke. She looked at Ryan beside her, his face lit by the red alarm lights. His eyes were not afraid. He stood as if the seeds were his own duty, his own life. In that moment, something inside her shifted. She realized he was no longer just a stranger at her gate. He was a guardian too. The fight ended when the raiders, beaten and frozen, stumbled back into the storm. Their voices faded into the night, leaving only the sound of the wind once more. Lyra stood still, her breath heavy. Her hands trembled, but her heart felt strong. The vault still stood. The seeds were safe. And for the first time, she had not guarded them alone. Ryan leaned against the wall, his chest rising and falling. He gave a tired smile. They will come again one day. But now they know this place is not unprotected. Lyra looked at him for a long moment. The shadows of betrayal still lived in her memory, but tonight she had seen something different. She had seen loyalty, not greed. She had seen courage, not hunger. She lowered her weapon slowly. "You fought for the seeds," she said quietly. Ryan nodded. "I fought for life. These seeds are not only yours. They belong to the future. And I will stand with you to protect them." The words settled deep in Lyra's heart. She had once believed no human could be trusted. Yet here, in the frozen silence of the vault, stood a man who had proven otherwise. The storm outside howled again, but inside the vault, a new strength had taken root. The shadows in Lyra's heart began to fade, replaced by something she had long forgotten: hope. The mountains stood calm after the storm. The snow stretched far into the horizon, white and endless. The vault lay quiet, its walls holding life that waited for a better world. Inside, the silence was no longer heavy with loneliness. It was steady, like the breathing of two guardians who had faced darkness and still remained. Lyra walked the halls, her boots echoing softly against the metal floors. She checked the machines, the shelves, the chambers. Each row of seeds stood safe, untouched by the chaos outside. Her heart, once restless, carried a new stillness. She was not alone now. Ryan worked nearby, repairing the last damage left from the attack. His hands moved with patience, tightening bolts, sealing cracks, and testing circuits. He worked without needing to be told, as if the vault had become his home too. 4 days after the raiders fled, the two of them worked side by side. The vault returned to its calm rhythm. Alarms were silenced. Machines glowed steady green. The shelves stood tall again. And slowly, a fragile peace grew inside Lyra. One night, as she sat at her desk with her journal, she paused before writing. Her hand hovered above the page. The words that came to her mind were not the same as before. No longer full of suspicion, no longer heavy with fear. Instead, she wrote, "Today, I did not guard the vault alone. Today, I shared the weight, and it was lighter. I have begun to believe that trust can grow like a seed, small at first, but strong if cared for." When she closed the journal, her eyes were softer. The next morning, Ryan spoke of the world outside. He sat by the main console, his voice thoughtful. "My village struggles. The soil is thin, the rivers are dry. Children grow hungry. The people dream of fields, but they only see dust." Lyra listened in silence. She knew the pain of his words, though she had chosen to hide from it. The seeds behind her were not only her duty, they were hope for villages like his. Yet her mind carried the old warning, if she gave too much, others might take until nothing was left. She studied Ryan carefully. His eyes did not ask for greed. They carried only a quiet plea. At last, she said, the seeds are not meant to stay locked forever. One day, they must return to the soil. But the time must be right. The world must be ready. Ryan nodded slowly. And how will we know when the time comes? Lyra looked around the vault. For so long, she had believed her task was only to guard, never to give. But now she wondered if guarding was not only about walls and gates. Perhaps it was also about knowing when to share. We will know, she said softly, when people are ready to protect life, not take it. When they come not with weapons, but with hands to plant. The words felt strange on her tongue, but they were true. The days passed, and the bond between them grew like the quiet roots of a tree. They spoke more now about the past, about the lost green lands, about the world that might be rebuilt. Lyra found herself smiling at moments, something she had forgotten long ago. But beyond the mountain, the world still waited. And whispers traveled faster than snow. One evening, as they watched the horizon through the cameras, Ryan pointed to a small figure moving slowly up the frozen path. It was not a raider, not a soldier. It was a child. The boy was thin, wrapped in torn cloth, his steps heavy from hunger. He carried nothing but a small empty bag. Lyra's heart clenched. She had prepared for enemies, for thieves, for those who would destroy. She had not prepared for a child who looked at the vault with eyes full of need. Ryan's voice was quiet. He must have come from far away. Perhaps he heard of this place. The boy stumbled at the gate, too weak to knock. He fell to his knees in the snow. Lyra hesitated, torn between duty and compassion. But when she looked at the boy, she saw no threat, no greed. She saw the same hunger that had once driven her people to despair. Slowly, she pressed the switch to open the small service door. Together, she and Ryan carried the boy inside. They gave him water, bread from their stores, and a blanket for warmth. The boy ate slowly, his eyes wide with both fear and gratitude. When he could finally speak, his voice was thin. My village sent me. They said the mountain keeps food for the earth. They told me to find it, or not return. The words struck Lyra like a weight. Here was proof that the seeds could no longer stay hidden forever. The world was calling for them. She looked at Ryan. His eyes met hers, steady and calm. In that moment, they both understood. Guarding the seeds was no longer only about keeping them safe. It was also about knowing when to let them grow again. The boy's village would be the first. A small gift of seeds, carefully chosen, carefully guided. Not enough to empty the vault, but enough to prove that life could return. That night, Lyra walked through the chambers with Ryan. She opened a drawer and lifted a small container of grain seeds, light and golden. Her hands trembled slightly, for this was the first time she had ever taken seeds out not for storage, but for planting. She whispered, "These are not just for his people. They are a promise." Ryan placed his hand over hers, steadying it. "Then let us plant the promise together." At dawn, they gave the boy the seeds and sent him back with care and instructions. His small figure walked down the snowy path, carrying more than grain. He carried the first hope of a world being healed. Lyra stood at the gate, watching until he disappeared into the white horizon. The wind brushed against her face, cold yet gentle. For the first time in many years, she did not feel the mountain was a prison. She felt it was a beginning. Beside her, Ryan spoke softly. You once told me you did not trust any human. But today, you trusted me. And today, you trusted him. Lyra looked at him, her eyes clear. Trust is like a seed. Small, fragile. But if we care for it, it will grow. The vault hummed behind them, alive with countless seeds waiting for their moment. And now, at last, the first had been planted not in the soil of earth, but in the soil of trust. The last guardian was no longer alone. The world would have a chance again.